Australian Intensive Care, and also Phil Oakley, an intensive care fellow at the Intensive Care Society.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've just finished listening to the opening plenary where Aoife was Twitter moderating. So how do you guys think it went?
I think it was a really, really good first morning, actually. It got the conference off to a very good start. Some very interesting topics that were discussed. And yeah, the audience seemed very engaged with it as well. And there was lots of online activity.
A few controversial comments made, though. What was your favourite?
I guess my favourite wasn't probably the controversy. I think what I enjoyed really was the whole spread. So there was quite a big spread of topics that were addressed. And I particularly liked the juxtaposition of Esther's talk on moral distress and moral injury, which I loved. And then that being followed by James's talk on the overdraft incident in Salisbury, which I thought was a beautiful juxtaposition, and I think was a really important message to everybody in the room.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, exactly, because with him following her, you just get to see in real time, actually, the usefulness of the things that she was saying. And actually, when I was listening to him, I thought they should probably have a chat afterwards. For him to kind of talk about some of his experiences. But yeah, very, very interesting.
Okay. And we also heard a little bit about, the UK intensive care versus, making the British intensive care great again. Do you think it needs to be made great again, or do you think we're already doing quite well?
I think both. I think we're already doing well, and we, could be doing a lot better. There's lots of training challenges that we have in intensive care that we don't have in other specialties. So that's something that, could definitely be worked on over the next few years. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, the day you think you can't improve is the day you should just leave medicine, and there's always somewhere better to go. I think one of the things I found really interesting in that talk was the whole idea of whether or not clinicians practicing in Britain care too much about their own autonomy. And I kind of wondered whether or not that was true, or is it that just we all feel that we don't do evidence-based medicine well enough yet, that we don't actually represent the patients in front of us in research well enough? And I don't know if maybe in 10 years when hopefully we've accessed big data and we're doing a lot more research and we're feeding all our patients into studies, that we might feel better about then applying the research to our patients.
So you think perhaps there's an intrinsic bias in our own practice?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like, in critical care, obviously, we deal with conditions that are, in the big scale of things, rare. Yeah. And then that means you have to get so many patients into your research to make it relevant, to get good data. You have to feed so many patients in that inevitably the spread of patients you then include in research is a big spectrum. It's never very specific. Even if you're looking at sepsis, there's lots of different types of patients and phenotypes in there. So you're left with a feeling, how well does this research represent the patient right in front of me? And I think that's always going to be the dissonance, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. I saw one of the Twitter posts earlier remind us all that sepsis isn't a disease, it's not an infection, and that a 90-year-old with chest sepsis, a 15-year-old with vasculitis, they're both sepsis, and we treat them the same. But you take away whatever that's brought them in, physiologically they're completely different beasts, and we don't tailor our practice appropriately.
Yeah.
The other thing that I liked was the Starling's curve of ICM, which demonstrated that as intensive care units get bigger, care improves, until you reach a plateau where at some point you have too many beds and care deteriorates. Where do you think your units fit in that Starling's curve?
I can't remember what the numeric was. What was his cut? What was the plateau point?
No, I can't recall either. I don't think he gave a number. He pointed to his own and said that he had some. He was going towards the plateau.
I feel like, if we say any number now, it's going to be controversial because obviously every unit's got an exact number.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to upset anyone with a 35-bed ITU, but I feel like that number could be anywhere up to around 20.
Yeah.
Maybe that, you've got then a good mix of patients. Maybe part of it is about you take patients that are not as sick if you're not so restricted on beds.
Yeah.
And of course, there's lots of evidence that the earlier you take patients, the better they do. So if you wait till patients deteriorate too much before you take them to ITU, obviously they're not going to do as well because they haven't had those interventions early on. So it's probably about the optimum between not being limited by beds, so you can take patients early, but then not having a unit so big that the service, that kind of real attention to detail then gets diluted. Maybe that's why.
So what I took away from it was that it's the eternal money question, and that the more beds you have, the more you can do if you've got the money to back it up. If you remunerate your staff and are able to, and just pay for basic things. I mean, having a 30-bed unit in a DGH, you're not going to do anyone any favors. So I personally don't think there's an absolute number, but that the number of patients that you treat should be keyed into what your resources are. And in a resource-poor environment, in a resource-poor hospital, perhaps you shouldn't be expanding your bed numbers if you can't pay for it.
I mean, I think really it depends, doesn't it, what you mean when you say care.
Yeah.
I mean, care, what outcomes are we actually talking about? Because there's always room for excellent nursing care, and intensive care absolutely gives patients access to reliable nursing care, and we tend to have less staffing issues on a daily basis than the wards do. And so patients receive more attention, and that's care. But then we've got outcomes. So whether or not it improves outcomes, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, you work with what you get. I mean, I've spent most of last year in what's considered to be the biggest intensive care facility in Europe, and that's in Birmingham. And I wouldn't say that care was deteriorated there because they had more than 100 beds.
Yeah.
I think it's just what you do with the beds you have, isn't it?
Well, I don't think we'll be solving that anytime soon, will we? Okay, so I'm going to so stick right with us, and we'll keep talking to you and informing you about what we're doing here. Thank you to Aoife, and thank you to Phil.
Thank you as well.